Yeah. I think it stays hot. Maybe we'll just leave it.
We are going to start this session now. We'll start with another short manifestation. And the main focus or purpose of this manifestation is once again to bring our attention to this beautiful, in this beautiful building and within ourselves, and then raise the awareness in its full capacity. And for that purpose, I'll chant the mantra, and then you can focus on the manifestation or the sound of the mantra, or you can focus on your breathing, or people who already have that your mind to focus on to raise awareness and do so. So before lunch session, we were talking about nature of the mind in a luminously clear, at that level, the nature in that sense. And this session, I would like to start to talk on the nature of the mind from all these things and events around us and ourselves also share some of the most fundamental, the nature of the mind. The historical Buddha had said many times to his followers that they're paying attention, knowing or understanding, realizing the nature of impermanence, that all things and events come into being, come into existence through the causes and conditions. They all are impermanence. No matter how beautiful, no matter how essential, no matter how destructive, that as long as that thing, that event, whatever materials, unmaterials, that things exist, if that things coming into being if that things coming into being is dependent on causes and conditions, that thing is impermanent. And so we're talking about nature of the mind more in a earlier discussion about that from its function, from its nature. Function is knowing, understanding, realizing. And nature is luminously clear. That is also helpful, useful to understand. It is equally important to understand the consciousness as a whole, and thoughts and emotions, the whatever feelings that occur, arise within us, they all are impermanent. And it is, all the impermanent things share these three characteristics: coming into being, coming into existence, then abide, then disintegrate. Although when I say these three characteristics, arise, abide, and disintegrate, it sounds they are more sequential. And some of the Buddhist teachers, some of the Buddhist philosophical schools, they assert that coming into being, abide, then disintegrate. Ne, jit. What means arise or coming into being. Ne means abide. Jit means disintegrate. For us, to our ordinary mind, including to our sense consciousnesses and also to our ordinary mental consciousness. Most of the things, we see in that fashion coming into being. Child is born. Now it's, coming into teenage. Now it's adult. Then, and middle age. Then so, then disintegrate. In that kind of things that we see. But Buddhist teachers, including Buddha himself, particularly some of those great Indian masters, like Nagarjuna, like Dhammakirti, they argue these three are almost simultaneous. They are not that kind of sequential. Sequential that we see is in a very gross form of nature or impermanence. That we see, that we experience. These days, I experience, I can't walk that long that I used to walk. When I was in London, quite often I walk 3-4 hours without that much, getting time. Sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, I walk like that, without any, what you call the air. But now, going a little bit, occasionally go to the main temple to pay respect and do some circumambulation after 5, 6, circumambulation in the big round. My body says, enough. That I feel, and that I can understand. Okay, that is impermanent, showing but it's very, very gross. My understanding of impermanence. That's only when I have a little bit ache, little bit side here and there, I can, impermanence is coming. But in reality, it is key. The clock is ticking all the time. Understanding of that kind of nature, relation to our mind, consciousness, hope, fear, thoughts, emotions, whatever that we have, whatever that arises, joyful, ever, without any, jumping. It is joyful, it is something, it comes from this, without any jumping, trying to understand its nature of impermanence. No matter even the consciousness as a whole, even, with this morning we're talking about sounds very, what's the right word anyway, luminosity and so on. But still, it is impermanent. So that is something Buddha himself has said many occasions. In Tibetan, Tashi, Rinpoche, yeah. So saying, among the many footprints, the elephant footprint is the most impressive. Similar to that, recalling or remembering or being mindful, among all these, what we be mindful with nature of impermanence is the most powerful. Like among the footprints, elephant footprints is most impressive. So this is something when we talk about nature of mind, nature of eye, nature of life, nature of all this, all things and events, whatever that might be, coming into being, if that coming into being is dependent on causes and conditions, that thing is, the nature, its nature going to be secret. That is something very, very useful, when we very, very well established, the meditation for foundation of the mindfulness. When you, do the meditation on the mind in that, the third one. One of the main meditation is to understand, be mindful. Mindfulness of the nature of the mind in relation to it is environment. Another factor here for us, what is helpful to understand the nature of the mind is whether it is constructive or whether it's destructive. In the both, the constructive consciousnesses of the mind, destructive consciousnesses of the mind, they're arising within us is 100% dependent on the causes and conditions, not in and of themselves. They do not occur. They didn't occur within us without causes and conditions. They occur within us with the causes and conditions. And many of those causes and conditions are within ourselves, not all the time outside. Very often, when we lose our temper, when we have a strong grasping on something, when we have a jealousy for something, envy for something, we're always to cultivate, to express love, to express compassion. We are very much dependent on external caused things and events. But in reality, most factors to arise, either constructive or destructive, they are within us. So in other words, the nature of dependency, the consciousness, any kind of consciousness, arises dependent on many causes and conditions. And many of these causes and conditions are within ourselves. Very often, and anyway, one of my earlier culture shock, on the one hand, on the other hand, very amusing, was when I had the question and answer session. I think it might be 1997 or 1996, when Jamyang Buddhist Center was in North London, in a small semi-detached four-bedroom semi-detached house. And we were talking, I was reading the Shantideva's 6th chapter dealing with the anger, cultivating compassion. And one of question and answer session, just chattering and sharing what are the means and methods to reduce deep sort of grudge or anger, very. There was a lady, she said, recently I went to some therapies to deal with the mind, this difficulty to deal with the anger. And one of the methods was very, very effective, she said. And I was very curious, want to know what's that method. And I asked, what's that method? Please can you share with the group? And a small group. And she said, oh, the therapist said, if you have a very, and there's really coming, boiling, go to your bedroom and the pillow, and bang the pillow. When I heard that, at first I was shocked. What are they doing? Bang the pillow. But then, yeah, it makes sense a little bit. That's true. Then I said, did you pill first? Okay, it is a method, but it is very temporary method. But why not? If it works, why not? But that's how we sort of try to search the solution to reduce some of those very powerful destructive emotions. It may work, that's fine. But the causes and the conditions to arise these destructive emotions, most of them are within ourselves. So we need to deal within ourselves. I'm not saying external factors, doesn't matter, but sometimes external factors, creates, or cause to arise these things. So this, in other words, what I'm saying is, any form, any kind of consciousness that is positive or negative, they are dependent on many other factors. When we say that, for example, if we want to cultivate, if we want to experience in a very stable mindfulness, then we need to create the causes within ourselves to arise that mindfulness. Without creating the causes, mindfulness will not occur, not arise. That those are the things that we need to cultivate and need to convince ourselves. Sometimes, I'm talking about ourselves, I'm talking about myself. Sometimes, when we read, in my case, when I read some of those texts and listen from some of those great teachers, I'm not. When I read, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, that's true. But it stays at the head level. That nodding, agreeing. It stays at head level. Head level, agreeing is not powerful enough to convince us. When I say to experience powerful mindfulness, that we need to create the causes. I'm sure 100% you agree with me. But then what we need to do, that agreement alone is not enough. We need to, what in English, I like that expression, gut feeling. That's what we need. Really from our gut. Yes. Then we will do. In the West, it is also the same, which we are going to discuss in the coming days. The simply accepting, agreeing, nodding is that knowledge is knowledge borrowed from others. It is not our own knowledge. Earlier, someone asked what is a bad how can we say that correct, correct mind, right mind? It is only through our own hard work. Then we'll have the right, correct, and we'll have the conviction. So here, in the early terms of the nature of impermanence, nature of the mind, here, this session, I'm talking about its impermanent nature, its dependent nature. These are important. The Tibetan word is Geshe, Tibetan. Geshe has a equivalent in English translated saying compounded phenomena. And the Tibetan word has a connotation of bringing together, to come, to bring together, to check. So, whether it's big or small, that, come together is dependent on causes and conditions that will disintegrate. And disintegrate will be the same time when it's coming into existence. There's no sequence. For our mind, ordinary mind, there is a sequence. First coming to being, then there's a nature of the body, then disintegration. But there are many of the Buddhist masters, they argue that's very gross. In reality, there's no sort of any sort of sequence between the coming into being and the disintegration. These two are taking place at the same time. Coming into being, disintegrations are taking place at the same time. So what's going to happen when we are able to reflect on these nature of the mind, impermanence, dependence? That will reduce the grasping, because including myself, when I was I'm still a student, but when I was student before to take my Geshe degree, very often, when I go to receive teachings from those great teachers, one of the things very often in my head is, what my teacher is going to say, new things today, new arguments to argue with my classmate, nobody heard before. That's my expectation to go to the class. But that is grasping, which is not very healthy. The moment my teacher didn't say anything new, I felt very disappointed. So here, when we're talking about the nature of the mind, realizing the nature of the mind, these are very, very powerful understanding the nature of the mind. As we discussed earlier, the purpose of learning the nature of the mind is to tame. The main part of the taming our mind is reducing the grasp, in Tibetan is called Zipa. Zipa. It has a strong connotation. As quite often people say the English word just grasping is not working. I understand that. But I feel that's the most powerful word, grasp. Because of the grasping, then attachment or anger, those unhealthy mental states arise because of the grasping. So in this case, the extremely helpful, as I quote now from the historical Buddha's sutra, being mindful, or being able to recognize nature of the mind. Its impermanent nature, its dependent nature. And when we convince that, then things will be relatively smooth to work with the mind. As long as there is strong grasping, the road will be very, very bumpy. Between Bana and Hippodgaya, the new highway, it is very nice, but lots of bumpy, particularly in the evening. If you have a driver who drives very fast, then there are lots of like this, because it seems not, as what you call the level is not done well, so there are lots of bumpy like that. That we are going to talk, we can talk. Nature of the mind is luminous, luminosity. Nature of the mind is Buddha nature, and so on and so forth. But what is important according to the teachings of the Buddha, how to train our mind is in a very step training. Then we'll see really some of the fundamental nature. Otherwise, Lord will be very to see the fundamental nature of the mind. Clear light, luminosity, these are not straightforward to understand the nature of the mind. So, when the historical Buddha taught in his first teaching, the Four Noble Truths, in that teaching, he taught nature of impermanence, nature of dukkha, nature of the level self-sufficient. Those are the things that we need to understand. Relation to the mind, relation to the consciousness. At our level, even if we all want to know the fundamental nature of the mind. But currently, what we have here, consciousness as a consciousness, whatever we have here, memories, good memory, positive memory, having those great teachings, having those great teachers, having visited those amazing places and having those great knowledge or understanding, still they are in a level of dukkha. In that level. I mean, I don't want to disappoint you, but that is how it is. And therefore, when we talk about the nature of the mind, and we need to understand that level too. Impermanence nature, dukkha nature, lack of self, substantial nature. These all are, shared. All these characteristics are shared with all the things and events what we have got right here now. They are not free from those characteristics. What Buddha taught. And in that context, Buddha said, should be understood fully with regard to the first noble truth. Noble truth of the dukkha, Buddha said, should be fully understood. And it is very beautifully put it in that short sutra, Four Noble Truths Sutra. He listed the dukkha, different kinds of dukkha. And then he said it should be fully understood. Once we fully understood their nature, then that is how the, what you call the realization. So here, when we meditate, contemplate, analyze the nature of the mind, it is not just the fundamental nature of the mind, luminosity or clear light, or many other terms that we can use, very, very fancy terms we can use. But to get into those levels, we need to deal with, these very, very day-to-day, what we experience. As I mentioned this morning, I'm talking about the power of the mind. The power of the mind and in our day-to-day life, in our everyday life. Because I have this course here, Saturday morning, wasn't very sure whether I'm going to get return flight or not. So that worry, that's one, sort of the morning more or less occupied my mind. Although I was meeting, I'm having very good breakfast in a hotel, and but those are not the taste, delicious taste up there. My mind is occupied with, is it about really going to go today? And that is the power. Even just that simple. But at the same time, that come into being due to the causes and conditions, not by itself, isn't it? But then it comes in it when the evening 6 o'clock, when when we reach at the Bangalore, what you call the airport, and the child was low, and the flight number was shown, and that, concern, everything is gone. I can chat with my friends and so. That is the power. And need to understand, if we understand that, in mind, that constant worry whether I'm going to get on time or not. No, it is really understanding, not reflecting, not understanding the nature of factors, just simply worrying I'm not going to get on my time. I have some Monday I have a class. Isn't it? So that's sort of, so the point what I'm making is to understand the nature of the mind. It is not just the one. It has many layers, many levels. Some are very fundamental, nature of impermanence, nature dependent on causal conditions. These are very, very fundamental nature. Fundamental in the sense almost every existence shares that nature. And we need to understand, be aware of that. Very, very helpful. Now you could do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now then, going back to the nature of the mind, and in the sense, luminosity. And this great Indian master, which also I touched briefly this morning, the nature of the mind is luminosity because afflictions, now I'm using this term, afflictions are advantages. So these two lines by Dhammakiti, great Indian master, logician, and the great logician, and in his out of 7 treatises, the main treatise, valid cognition, Pramana Padika, in the 2nd chapter, where Dhammakili was arguing with the opponents, how liberation is possible. How liberation is possible. Liberation from ignorance, attachment, and aversion. How liberation is possible from these 3 poisons. And his argument is this, because these are advantages. Sendye Rangshin Versava. Send is the mind. Rangshin is the nature. Sendye Rangshin Versava. Sometimes people translate clear light, or luminosity, or luminously clear, simply Rangshin Versava. Reason in the 2nd line, Tima Namni, Luburva, Tima. Literal translation, Tima, stain, stain, that stain, Tima, or affliction. Tima, affliction, Tima. Namni, plural, Lupurva, advantages. So now this argument is something quite useful to reflect on, to think. So why the ignorance, attachment, and aversion, these three are advantages? Then how can you prove the nature of the mind is clear light or luminosity? How can you prove that? Argument. That's the argument. So to prove that, Dhammakili is saying liberation is possible. So now here, for us, first, as I argued earlier, advantages in the sense because no matter how deeply rooted the ignorance, attachment, and aversion, no matter how deeply rooted, very much ingrained within our conscious, within our mental continuum, still there are impermanent. They are impermanent. Therefore, they are subject to change. That's the first argument. Advantages, being advantages, therefore liberation is possible. Liberation is possible in the sense these three poisons, I'm using just these three poisons are advantages, therefore, the nature of the mind, is luminosity or clear light. Now here, that argument here are put because they are advantages, therefore they are impermanent, therefore they are subject to change. That's the first argument we need to analyze. We need to make that argument to ourselves, that ignorance, attachment, and aversion, these three poisons can be reduced, initially can be minimized, and eventually they can be completely eradicated because they are impermanent. They are impermanent. That's the first argument we need to, critically need to analyze. Whether that argument works or not to ourselves, I don't know. But these are the arguments made by these great teachers. The second point here is there are antidotes. There are antidotes to get rid of these three poisons from our mental continuum. Antidotes for the ignorance, antidotes for the attachment, and antidotes for the anger. There are antidotes. And that's also an important argument need to reflect on. One of the key reasons that Buddhist masters have used to deal with the destructive mind, emotions, thoughts, to reduce, minimize, eventually to get rid of our mental continuum is applying the antidotes. That's the main, not taking drugs, not implanting chips, not getting drunk all the time to reduce the pain. The Buddhist teachers, not just Buddhist teachers, ancient Indian masters, main method is very much application, applying the antidotes. And that is something which we try to understand. Although some of these statements that I'm sharing with you, they are very old-fashioned, coming more than 2,500 years ago from the Buddha and subsequent Buddhist teachers. I'm sure if we properly apply, they are still very, very effective. Because why I'm saying this, although our attachment to the things is changing, but attachment itself is not changing. My attachment to my mobile phone is very strong, but same attachment to what I had before I don't have the mobile phone it is this grasp. Not enough, not good enough. And behind, they have, I don't have that kind of argument. Yeah. So the antidotes, what those great teachers have, shared with us. I think most of these antidotes are still extremely powerful and will work. Because the three poisons, fundamentally, three poisons have not changed. Ignorance, attachment, aversion, from they have not changed. Only change is the things that we are attached to and angry with what we are. They are very different. Otherwise, from these three poisons have not changed. So, in other words, antidote to these three poisons, what we need to apply? We need to apply exactly opposite to these three. Exactly opposite. Ignorance, exactly opposite to the attachment, and exactly opposite to the anger. Need to bring that kind of, what in Tibetan term is used, Ganda. Ganda is, completely opposite to that, whatever mind that we want to reduce. Currently, in my case, the patience is not there that much because anger is more there. And poor patient doesn't get much chance to arise because anger is more powerful. That's the nature. What is called is, mutually mutually exclusive. Externally it works, it will work to the internal. So this is the second point. First point is, that these three poisons are impermanent, therefore subject to change. Subject to change, not just change from the what you call it's subject to change in the sense reduce, minimize, and eventually get rid of from our mental continuum, or subject to change in the other on the other hand, increase, more stabilize, and so forth. So subject to change. For the people who are seeking, genuinely seeking, want to tame their mind. These are something very, very positive, what you call positive or the very good news. On the one hand, want to tame our mind. On the other hand, if we say, no, you can't change, then it's very, what you call the bad news. Because want to change, but say, no, you can't change, then it's bad news. But when we say, okay, want to reduce, minimize, and eventually get rid of, it is possible because they are impermanent. And that argument is very important argument. Second argument, what I say share here is there are antidotes to these three poisons. And these antidotes have worked for many people. And they will also work with us. They will work, also for us. Why not? If application of these antidotes work to these great teachers, why don't they work for us? It is same. So, like that. Then the last point I want to share here in this context is, as this morning I briefly touched, we are lucky, we are fortunate. Antidote is not well somewhere there. Antidotes are taught by those great teachers. We can learn from those great teachers' teaching. Wow. It is not something antidotes are there, somewhere in a store, not like that. Antidotes, with good effort, can be learned from those great teachings, from those great teachers, from those great experienced people. In that sense, earlier that day morning, that argument, fortunate. One of the reasons why the Nakajuna said that this is precious human life. One of the reasons is because there are teachings available where we are. And in that sense, we are okay. So think about these other points shared by some of those great teachers to understand the nature of the mind. To understand the nature of the mind, the Buddha said, the nature of the mind is clear or luminosity, because afflictions are advantages. So because of this, liberation is perfectly possible. Liberation is perfectly possible. The afflictions are arguments, powerful arguments. So that is the thing which point I would like to share with you. Now, that I'm going to move to more, like in the meditation, briefly I would like to touch on the meditation. So this morning, I raised the point saying meditation is a tool to work with the mind, to deal with the mind, to train the mind, whatever term that we use. To train the mind, to tame the mind, whatever, the term that we use. Meditation is a tool. And here, then to use or to apply, to do the meditation, to apply for the cultivate the basic, what you call the qualities of the mind. That is, the stillness or the stability and the clarity, or calm, stable, and the clarity, whatever term that we use. Sometimes people use stability in Tibetan, and the term is, Dhamma or Stemma. Or sometimes Tibetan term is used, never. So abide in the sense there's a degree of, your mind is able to stay at the one point. And with that, have the clarity And that is the basic qualities that we need to enhance, we need to develop. And then enhancement, cultivation is done, of these two qualities. Cultivation is done with some of the simple meditation, breathing meditation, or the walking meditation, simply to bring our attention to the present, right here and now. Right here and now. Initially, out of those two qualities, initially it is the stability, priority, the focus to cultivate is the stability. That kind of, stillness. That is the first, focus. Then when there is a little bit stability, then need to move to the clarity. Satcha, Tibetan, nature, satcha. Here that refers to, the qualities, the quality of, being able to stay at the, on a particular meditation object, nature, stability, satcha, that's the clarity. It is perfectly possible while our mind is with an object, not distracted, but still there's no clarity. And clarity is equally important as stability. So those two qualities need to be cultivated. And if we, as I mentioned this morning, if we spend like 10-15 minutes in a regular basis, then maybe 6, 7, 8 months, we will see some results. We'll experience some certain degrees of stability in our mental continuum, and with that, certain degrees of clarity. Clarity doesn't need to be, a very fantastic result at the beginning. That's difficult, but with the gentle push, with the skillful application of skill, then we will see the result. That is not that difficult to enhance these two qualities. When I was in London, I did a master degree, and in my master degree, the thesis I did with the mindfulness, what is happening in the West, particularly in the West. Mindfulness meditation is very popular, very widely spread, and I don't want to argue whether that will count as a movement, social movement, or not. That was my main argument. And my research or did some field work with the 4 law firms in London City. There are 4 international law firms. They all have, more at the top floor. They all have meditation room, mindfulness meditation room. Sadly, only for the CEOs, not the majority of the company people. But these people are not interested to reduce attachment, anger, or anything like that. They simply want to cultivate degrees of concentration, degrees of mindfulness, through that reduce the stress. That's their main aim. And when I interview with them, and several times I went to these meditation sessions, not many, 2, 3, 4, in each law firms. Very, very posh. Before getting there are lots of things to be attached. Coffee, tea, and everything. Anyway, and these 4, out of 4, 1 lady, 3 are men, yeah, and they all say the same, things. What they say, yes, just doing 5-10 minutes on a regular basis, breathing meditation helps to reduce stress. And not only they themselves feel that, but their wives or husbands, they express changes. So that really convinced me, if we really put effort to do these simple meditation, cultivate these basic mental qualities, that will, result will happen. That is, once again, I want to repeat that which I said earlier. We need to convince ourselves. Change will take place. We need to, we should have confidence within ourselves to change, to cultivate these mental qualities. If we are lack of confidence to ourselves, then change is very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. So that's an important point. I will say it again and again, but I'll say now here. The point that's also that I mentioned earlier, the cultivation of these 2 mental qualities. I want to end it on a little bit on that. That is different types of meditation, different kinds of meditation. Now, the stability and the clarity. On top of stability and the clarity, then have the ability to analyze. That's a very, what you call the another skills that we need to develop. Ability to analyze. What is in English, quite often the term is used, critical analysis. That's the term. But to do the critical analysis with our mental qualities, with our mental states, it is very, I think it is very different from to do the critical analysis on the outside things. To do to study outside fields, whatever it might be. But so therefore, there are different styles or different traditions. But some of these great Indian masters, like Nagarjuna, like, the Chattakiti and so forth. They explain the sequence of the cultivation of these two kinds of meditations. Initially, cultivation of stability and equality, that's the priority. When that levels of, when these two qualities are enhanced, are cultivated, at least at a certain level, then train our mind to do the analysis. The same, the qualities that we have cultivated, stillness and clarity, that same mind need to tune into analytical mind. So in other words, like the have a plan, a long plan. Plan. No, month. What?
Yeah,
Plan. Okay. Plan. Then turn into a beautiful, statue. Similar to that. Initially, what we have cultivated, that kind of very, that quality mind, which has quality of stillness and the clarity, then those two mind which have those two qualities itself gradually turn into analytical mind. While there's a stability and a clarity. Stability and the clarity is not lost at the time of the analysis. Not at the time of the analysis. These two, if stability and the clarity are not there, then analytical mind will be sharp to do the analysis. One of my teachers used to give it a very dramatic, what you call the image. And then as an example in this case, without the stability and the clarity, if we try to cultivate an analytical mind, then it is like the axe doesn't have any sharpness. Can't cut the wood. No matter how much you hit, because the axe doesn't have the sharpness, unable to cut the wood. So similar to that, without the stability and the clarity, if we try to analyze, difficult to, get what we want. So that is the sequence which sometimes quite helpful to know. And there are different traditions, but the traditions that I'm talking and what I'm explaining is this. Now I'm going to use the Buddhist jargon, shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha is cultivated earlier, then later vipassana is added on. During the shamatha meditation, stability and clarity is cultivated, and on that result of that shamatha meditation, what you have cultivated, then that turns into vipassana. analytical meditation. And eventually, what the Tibetan term is this: Shila Sundero, She, Shamatha, Ha, Atom, Vipassana, Sundero, union, Sundero, become together, become one. While there's analysis, sharp analysis, critical analysis is taking place, at the same time, there's tremendous stability and the clarity. So that is something meditation that the tools that we need to learn, And here, most of the instruction or the suggestion is given. Of course, like me in our level, we can't wait until the full shamatha is experienced. We can't wait that. It is said once our mind has the degrees of stability and the clarity, and then try to use them, try to turn that into analysis, analytical mind. So that is what normally the advice or the instruction is given. One of these great Tibetan teachers, here I'm quoting from 14th century Tibetan master, practitioner, as well as a great scholar from Kapila. In one of his short writing, he said, Shila Sundu Deve Nevyurti. She as Amacha, Shine, that is Shamatha. Shila, that is Atom, the Vipassana, Shila. Sundu means together, union. Nerjo, yoga. The yoga of the union of the shamatha and vipassana, Shila Sundu Devi Nerjogi, by the yoga. Things in Yamata. So your the samadhi will increase like waxing the moon, wax increase. In that way, he says, you can cultivate powerful wisdom. Powerful wisdom. Wisdom that can be utilized to deal with ignorance, which we were talking about earlier. And antidotes for the ignorance, for the attachment, for the and hatred and anger. What we need is these kind of tools, powerful mental tools. Powerful mental tools. So through it, then we'll see the nature of the mind. Particularly as the Jiva used the term, the fundamental nature of the mind. We will see the luminosity. We will see the clear light. Whatever these different terms that we use. Or earlier, there was a question, we will see the Buddha nature. So useful to to aim for the long term, not for the short, the sighted, like anyway, have a long-term aim, gradually, step by step, working strategy. That's what we need to understand the nature of the mind. Like an onion, when we peel the onion, layer after layer, to understand the nature of the mind, that's what we need to peel initially the outer, those gross misunderstanding about the nature of the mind. That way. Unless if we peel that gross misunderstanding nature of the mind, it is difficult to go deeper. Want to be. So, yeah. What I said today, the first 3 or 4 points is the general, which I thought is very, very useful to convince myself. It is important to work with my mind, thoughts, and emotions. So, because let me know my next life, just this life, just this life, to have a happy life. It is not just getting physically healthy, it is mentally well balanced. Let alone next life, I don't know. But this life is very clear. To have a happy life, it is not just good enough to have a lots of physical exercises, need mental exercise, because our existence is combination of these two, mind and body, not just the body. That's the first. We really need to convince ourselves, which I'm going to touch on a little bit, going to explore that a little bit tomorrow morning too. Some of you may irritate, but that's my nature, how I lead classes. Going back again and again, repeating again and again, while I was in London, there are people, they may ask, why you are repeating again and again? Sorry, that's my nature. But to really to sit into, as I used earlier, and on gut level, need to bring that again and again. And eventually it will make connection. Otherwise it will stay at not even at that level. And that's not powerful. Then also this morning I said, it is important to understand that the Buddhist term is precious human existence. This existence is very, very valuable, very, very resourceful existence for ourselves and for if we want to do something for others. Very, very resourceful existence. On the way after lunch and coming towards this evening, coming towards here, there were 4 goats. Yeah, goats. We're living in the same planet at the same time, in the same place. They have the degrees of consciousness. They have the degrees of communication to communicate with others. If they feel thirsty, they may, say make certain noise, but compared to us, very, very limited. What they can do, and they like what they cannot do. For us. So you can see, then, so therefore, seeing, understanding, realizing, it is very, very resourceful, fortunate existence. We really need to convince ourselves that is how it is. But at the same time, it is not going to last forever. I used to, now I stopped using this for a long time, but I used to give, because that time I was watching lots of this, what you call the Formula One motor racing on early time in London in a small TV screen. So, those powerful cars. I used to give that example. If somebody really wants to drive one of those Formula One cars, or whatever, and your friends lend you that powerful car that you really want to drive, but your friend, he or she said, only a few minutes. After that, I will take away from you. You will drive immediately. Because after a few minutes, your friend will take away from you. So similar to that, I said this existence that we have is very, very, resourceful, capable existence. But it will not last forever. Like your friend will take away your pride within a few minutes. So that kind of what you call the mindset is very, very helpful. Initially, it might be, as I mentioned earlier, might be a little bit, scary, a little bit frustrating, a little bit all those things. But once that knowledge is really settled down, once that understanding is very much settled down in our mental continuum, that will be very, very powerful tools. Particularly, I have a very bad habit of procrastinating. Tomorrow. And, realization of that nature will be a very, very powerful antidote to deal with bad habit, postponing. And it is important, but I will do it tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes. So that's very important to remember. And then, we move to talk about, there are 3 terms I used, many of these Buddhist ancient Buddhist treatises refers to the mind, the law, Shiva, Ripa, the law, cognition, Shiva, consciousness, Ripa, awareness. That, we touch on that, and that will come. These points will come again and again in the coming days. Helpful to, to bear in mind. Then also we talk about the nature of the mind, what you call luminosity or luminously clear, and also nature of the mind in the sense its function, knowing, understanding. This knowing, understanding from the functional viewpoint is very important to understand in its full capacity, which we will talk tomorrow a little bit more. The knowing capacity or that kind of feature. Yeah, we'll talk that a little bit tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Then this afternoon, late afternoon, talk a little bit about the nature of the mind in the sense it is impermanent. It is dependent on the causes and conditions, and also, because afflictions are advantages, the nature of the mind is luminosity or clear light, according to the Dhammakirti's text. So those are the points that I share with you today, and we'll add it on tomorrow more. So I will stop here. We'll have a little bit longer question and answer session. And also if you have points, what you have discussed at the discussion group, usually most productive, the sessions are the discussion sessions, not from listening from one person. Listening from, sharing from your friends, Dharma friends, is usually most productive. And so if there are points that you would like to raise during your discussion session, or you have some your own questions, that would be great. So I will try to answer. Okay.
So the 3 points that you mentioned, you see there are 3 mutually exclusive antidotes.
Mm-hmm.
So what are those specific antidotes?
That's one. I think.
I will repeat. Yeah. So the 3 points that you mentioned, what are the mutually exclusive antidotes to those 3 poisons?
Okay. I'm not going to share with you these 3 because if I share with you, this will become too much jargon. I want you to work with that. As I mentioned earlier, we all experience degrees of ignorance. We all experience degrees of attachment. We all experience degrees of anger or hatred. Try to find out mentally, not externally, mentally try to find out what is the opposite of attachment. If I just use detachment, that's just jargon. Yeah. And if I say, and opposite of anger is patience, that's also just jargon. It will go from here. What we need is a deliberately left behind, to say that because you need to do work a little bit by yourself. Okay, this is what he said. It seems this is what his great teacher was saying. Now, when I experience anger, how it arises, how you feel at the mode of anger. And what is the opposite of that? The same as the attachment. attached to a delicious coffee. How to deal with that? I mean, these are the very simple examples. But they learn from the simple examples, then go to the more difficult, deeper. So that also next day, few days, you can talk at your discussion group. Other people may have different examples. What's the opposite of anger? Angry with your friends. What's the opposite of that? How can I experience opposite of that? My anger with my friends. So that's something useful. For example, it is very, the traditional Indian, not just Buddhist, traditional ancient Indian practice. Now this morning, when I came in, I did a prostration, and then my friends stayed. And one of the most admirations some of the Indian cultures is, when children, either they are living or they first come back to the home, you touch parents' feet with your hands. And that's very, very, amazing culture. What does that do? Touching your parents' feet with your most important part of your body, forehead. What that will do emotionally?
Gratitude.
Sorry.
Gratitude.
Gratitude. Yeah.
Humbleness.
Humbleness. That's what I'm looking at. That's how it is. Making prostration, it is the antidote to deal with the act. And respecting gratitude also, but main point is to deal with your arrogant mind. The most important part of your body is touching somebody's feet. And that's doing it in public, not in the hidden. So that's here what we need to learn. For example, there are lots of offerings. I mean, it's quite easy to make offerings on the shrine in front of the statues and so forth. But it's not easy to make offerings to the beggars. Why is that? Why is there were these difficulties to make offerings to the beggars?
Like it's a conditioning of the mind as well. You're used to refusing to them, but then you're used to donating in temples.
Donating to at the altar is not very pure, holding something back.
Exactly, yeah.
That giving donation to the poor is full loss. If you think about the future, that's different. This might be a full loss. I remember this very, very clearly from my own experience. The center I used to work, It is in one of the not very upcoming area, but when the Jamyang Buddhist Center moved from the North London to the South London, the place was notoriously, pickpocketing and what you call robbing and so forth. It is called Independent Castle. It's a big roundabout. And under the roundabout, there is a very, very complicated subway. Unless you will live around and you have walked this subway for many times, you will not understand where this subway is going to end. So during the winter, also sometimes, but mostly during the winter, there are many, homeless people in the subway, wet, cold, all the things, and they may have people, what's called those box, as a cushion, maybe have it in sleeping bag given by those charities. They will ask, some change. That's a nice word. Please, some change. And, that's how, and then, because I did my shopping by myself, most of the my weekly shopping by myself. And that's where I need to go, I need to pass to get to the Elephant Castle shopping center. So, I've changed, but my hand is not going there when they ask, why? Grasping. My hand is not too short to reach the pocket, but grasping holds my hand back. So here's the attitude. So we really very much need to apply to ourselves. If we use just those jargons, the jargons will not necessarily work. Learn the things. Working with the mind is learning by ourselves. Of course, listen from those great teachers, read those great texts. Then we need to work by ourselves. I have so many stories about this subway. Anyway, this is my Any questions?
I was just wondering if there was. I was just wondering if there was any sort of contemporary understanding of neurodivergence in Buddhism, like neurodivergence.
No.
Neurodivergence.
I don't know.
In Buddhism. So also how to guide neurodiverse people into meditation.
Are you talking about neurodivergence? You're talking about something really right?
Anything that's not neurotypical.
Okay. I mean, in the Vajrayana teachings, in Buddhism, they talk about the different chakras at the different parts of the body. And one of the most sophisticated chakras are like the wheel, are based in our, the level within our head. That's only I can say. Apart from that, the neuro, all those things are relatively new phenomena, even in the scientists, isn't it? I was told until recently, or maybe 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, even those Western neuroscientists, they believe the brain is more like it's static. Once it's set, it is set. but now they're saying neuroplastic state, something like that. So I really don't know. I really don't know. That's the honest answer. Any questions?
Very good. You spoke at some length about the luminous clarity as a concept. Can you, I guess, speak to it as it relates to your own life? You know, how often do you experience it? Do you feel like you're always in a luminous clarity? Like,
You must be joking. Okay, yes.
and can you, I guess, provide some more details on what that feels like in your life, and maybe compared to us who certainly are not in that state. I can speak for myself.
Now here, as I mentioned earlier, relation to the cultivation of mental qualities of stillness and the clarity, as I mentioned. To experience some of these mental qualities, including the nature of the luminosity, at the mind of nature of the mind, which is luminosity nature. If we apply the right meditation and have the persistence, have the continuation, I'm sure we'll experience degrees of luminosity. In other words, degrees in the sense, less what you call the destructive minds, more, in a state of clarity. Definitely we will experience. For example, people who experience just doing simple breathing meditation, and through that application for 6, 7, or 8 months or year, when they experience the benefits of doing that, that's the sign. That's a sign. We all, not just me, not just those great teachers, we all can experience. So no matter I don't have any that kind of great experience, if I say to, even if I say the great experience, this might be what in Tibetan you call, the delicious food in the cage, glass cage. Not that kind of meaning. We need to experience for ourselves. That's important.
You mentioned about Samta and Vipassana. Vipassana I understand, but Samta is a new word for me. If you can please explain that.
Okay. I think I will explain more this point coming days. Hopefully that will get some clarification for you. Okay? Yeah. So this will be the last question. Then we will say together 21 Tara prayers.
Okay. We've been talking about the mind is impermanent, and it's somehow I experience it like this. And I've been listening about to you this luminous clear mind. So and I checked, I recognized that I experienced that my mind obvious and clear, it would be maybe permanent. So this is a question because in Vajrayana, this mind is more or less permanent.
This word permanent and impermanent cause some culture, due to culture, culturally understanding about the term, the permanence or impermanence. Now here, in the Buddhist explanation about permanence or impermanence, that's more better to start. In impermanence, that doesn't mean, if this clock is impermanent, it is there at the first place, now it's not there. It is impermanent because it's constantly changing. Minute by minute, second by second. It seems in the English connotation of permanent or impermanent, it is more like, it's impermanent, so it's not there anymore. That's my understanding. When I lead these kind of classes, that kind of question. If it is impermanent, it shouldn't be there. But that's not the case in here. This is impermanent because it's, constantly changing. Though it's there, in terms of the continuation, it's there. So now going back to your question, luminosity, clarity, these are impermanence. The impermanence because, first of all, they are dependent on the causes and conditions. In that sense, they are impermanent. Secondly, they are momentarily changing. Therefore, they are impermanent. But if you look at it as a continuation, then we can see it's there. It is here with regard to the continuation. So people have this little bit misunderstanding when people look at the continuation as some used knowledge of this clock was there in the morning and it's still there. That's my understanding anyway. Okay, shall we stop here? Otherwise we may sink into impermanence. Yeah. Shall we say the Tonan Paradas, you have the prayer? Can I go on prayer book? Which page?
270.
We are going to say in Tibetan, so therefore.
Maybe 227.
Which page?
270.
270. Okay, it's 270. Ready? Om Je Ma Pa Ma Cha Ce Cha Ce Do Ma Nyo Ma Pa Chen Ne Ke Ji Lo Dan Cha Je Gen Sung Gue Chi Di She Di Khensur Chi Wa Ne Ne Chu Ma Cha Ce Dong Ge Da Wa Gu Du Gao Hua Tian Ni Si Bei Xin Ma Kama kumta sopa namaki rāpa chele rāpa Chāngse sene chune keki pēne chāne nāpar kēma Jemba sūdhu pātu shēma Sāpa samde chūnyēma Chāngse tēshī chēpū sūdhu Tāye nāpar kyāma chēma Madhu Paro Chimba Tobe, Yahweh Siddhi Shindu Tema, Chante Tutara Kumbhige, Deta Chota Nagatama, Jede Tumbo Shakti Nende, Leva Meva Gurva Nema, Chante Gyate Neva Samba, Longla Loso Wanchu Chema, Jobora Kisana, Nere Soki Dunyendera, Changse Kiki Taban Devi, Paro Chuku Raku Choma, Emu Yenda Shaki Nende, Mabana Kuba Shindo Pama, Changse Turi Chemo, Devi Pavona Parachoma, Konye Tense, Dao Tama, Chanse Pucho Somse, Chanse Toka Parachema, Manu Kodo Cheme, Rangi Veki Son Kema, Chanse Ratu Kawachi, Udin Veki Tengwa Tema, Shivana Chituta Rai, Teta Chiken Wantu Zema, Chanse Sanchi Tongwe Sona, Tamche Gurpa Nima Yema, Tonye Yema Yike Munge, Pongwa Tamche Nabara Choma, Chanse Dawe Tumbo Munge, Tenpa Tamche Shin, Nebe Chune Lopame, Pabara Shindo Rabasema, Chanze Kebe Taman Meta, Barwe Chenwe Lunemba, Yeda Yukune Koke, Daye Pune Nabara Choma, Chanze Soki Waba Chaki, Teki Nechi Shaki Doma, Tony Tense Ike Mungi, Tenpa Tumbo Namni Kema, Chante Tenpa Kema Shema, Nyange Deshi Junema, So Onda Yata Tende, Ipa Chenpo Chompa Nema, Chante Koron Kave, Daye Lune Nabar Kema, Ige Chube Mani Purve, Ripa Hune Zomanyema, Chante Dure Shani Dave, Pongi Nane Sabunema, Rega Menda Ratam Beje, Chicken Sumna Yoanyema, Chante Pai Soyi Name, Rega Taji Chama Tara Nije Peye, Đông Nam Lư Quan Niên Xem, Trong Dê Mai Phong Kê Bộ, Hoa Đăng Niên Chi Đê Mà, Quân Niên Cô Cha Bao Chi Đi, Chơ Đăng Nơ Mân Niên Ba Xem, Trong Dê Ni Ma Đăng Kê Bê, Kê Niên Bò La Rô Xem, Hà Ra Nhi Chư Tu Ta Rai, Shin Bo Thảo Ngư Linh Nên Xem, Trong Dê Đi Yin Sung Cơ Bê, Shì Tô Tăng Yang Ta Têm, Đến Tổng Lưu Non Lê Duyên Sô Nam, Trong Bà Tu Lê Ra Chô Nhiêm, Sa Lê Ma Kỳ Chơ Ba Tì Đà, Cha Dê Hoa Nê Nhi Su Sa. Thank you.